Pushing Past the 38th Parallel by Aaron Waters and Michael Green. July 1950. The North Korean government was wanting to unite the country as a whole and spread their communist views throughout the country. The U.S. knew they could not allow this and had to halt all advances. The U.S. and UN supplied troops to help the Southern Army, but they were vastly outnumbered. General MacArthur ordered his troops, who were being pushed back daily, to stop retreating and hold their ground. The Northern Army, to the surprise of the U.S. and UN, were very dominating and had a counterattack for every move the opposition threw at them. They had crossed the 38th parallel, captured the capital Seoul, and were pushing the Southern Army into Pusan. As the army was battling for survival in southern Korea, General MacArthur feared without a clever attack that North Korea would be successful in capturing and controlling the whole country. MacArthur began to develop a daring plan to quickly end the war. This plan was to capture Incheon, liberate Seoul, and to push communism out of the South. September 15, 1950, General MacArthur was about to initiate his amphibious attack and landing at Incheon. The battle lasted 4 days and was a decisive victory and a strategic reversal in favor of the UN. After this victory, luck and momentum was back on the UN side, as the army in Pusan began to push the Northern Army back up toward the 38th parallel, and at the same time, the forces in Incheon began to move toward Seoul to recapture the city. General MacArthur, along with President Truman, wanted a free North Korea. They knew they could only achieve this by crossing the 38th parallel and invading North Korea. President Truman gave the order to MacArthur, but told him to stop only if resistance from China was to come about. He feared China's involvement because of their vast size and ample amount of soldiers. MacArthur assured Truman that if Chinese resistance came about, that they would be destroyed.
U.S. and UN forces marched north hastily, competing with one another to see who could capture more territory and enemy soldiers. They were having success on the battlefield, but UN supplies began running low. UN forces ignored numerous warnings by China that they were getting too close to their border. As UN forces approached the Yalu River, they were surprised to find out that 300,000 Chinese soldiers crossed the river and planned to attack. October 25, 1950, Chinese forces attacked and completely surprised UN forces. Even with a surprise attack with 300,000 soldiers, the Chinese were defeated and retreated back across the Yalu River in just 10 days. After this victory, U.S. and UN forces began their march back to the Yalu River without resistance until 2 days after Thanksgiving. The UN forces were attacked by thousands of undetected Chinese soldiers. This surprise attack worked for the Chinese this time, pushing UN forces back, retreating hundreds of miles. Seoul was once again captured on January 5, 1951, and the North Korean army pushed the UN forces back an additional 70 miles. With the death of 8th Commander General Walt Walker, in came Matthew Ridgway. Ridgway is given credit for turning the war by being able to stop the northern advance and once again liberating Seoul. Ridgway's forces had pushed the Northern Army all the way out of South Korea past the 38th parallel.
The U.S. and UN forces once again had rid the South of communism, and President Truman and the UN was satisfied with this feat. But General MacArthur, being the ambitious man he was, wanted to again rid Korea of all communism and had ideas that just couldn't be supported. He felt as if the U.S. should use nuclear weapons on Korea, but Truman did not support this idea because of the lack of nuclear weapons the U.S. possessed, the difficulty with the terrain in Korea, and the opinion the world would have on them if they use another nuclear weapon so soon. MacArthur then said that he wanted to bomb Chinese bases and factories in Manchuria, as well as destroying the bridge between the Yalu River, which connected North Korea and China. However, Truman felt that if the U.S. began bombing China, it would cause the Chinese to retaliate and bomb U.S. airfields, aircrafts, and just would increase hostilities and possibly get the Soviet Union involved in the war. General MacArthur felt that if Chiang Kai-shek's forces invaded the mainland China, that it would distract China from everything going on in Korea. This idea made Truman believe it would only lead to an escalation of the war, no longer in Korea, but all of Asia. MacArthur believed the only way to end the war with a victory was to completely liberate Korea as a whole. Truman was limited in what he could do. He tried to compromise with General MacArthur, but that only infuriated MacArthur more. President Truman was just in fear of starting World War III. On April 11, 1951, President Truman shocked the nation by relieving General MacArthur from his duties. General MacArthur and President Truman just did not see eye to eye on the next move in Korea, and President Truman believed that MacArthur's ideas was just going to lead them down a path of no return.